On April 10, 1912, the RMS Titanic, the most famous ship ever built, prepared to leave Southampton, England, for its maiden voyage. Aboard were the world's wealthiest individuals, holding coveted first-class tickets. However, the man who owned the Titanic, J. Pierpont Morgan, quietly canceled his plans at the last minute. This would mark the beginning of a remarkable tale intertwining the ship, America's economy, and Morgan's legacy. To grasp this narrative, one must appreciate the immense power of J.P. Morgan. He was not merely a banker. He was a titan of industry, a one-man economy. Throughout his career, Morgan engineered the creation of giant corporations like U.S. Steel and General Electric. He held controlling interests in notable companies including Aetna and Western Union, and he influenced 21 railroads. Morgan's stature during the Gilded Age positioned him as a figure who didn't just engage in capitalism. He embodied it. While it is easy to assume that the Titanic was inherently a British vessel, the truth reveals a more complex ownership structure. Although registered in Britain, the Titanic was owned by J.P. Morgan, whose company controlled the White Star Line. The White Star Line itself was a subsidiary of the International Mercantile Marine Company, an American holding company entirely owned by Morgan. Thus, the so-called unsinkable Titanic was not merely a British ship. It was Morgan's investment and vision. In 1902, Morgan financed the establishment of the International Mercantile Marine, aiming to dominate the Atlantic shipping trade. During the Titanic's grand launch in May 1911, Morgan had reserved a luxurious suite for the voyage, but canceled it shortly before the ship struck an iceberg and sank. Astonishingly, 2 days after the catastrophe, Morgan celebrated his 75th birthday in France, seemingly unfazed. This twist has stirred conspiracy theories, suggesting that Morgan intentionally avoided the voyage to eliminate his rivals, John Jacob Astor, Benjamin Guggenheim, and Isidor Straus, all of whom perished in the wreck. However, this narrative lacks evidence, especially since Guggenheim purchased his ticket after Morgan had already canceled. Moreover, were Morgan to orchestrate such a disaster, he would only have harmed himself, as the sinking dealt a blow to his finances rather than a windfall. Instead, the Titanic venture represented one of Morgan's few significant failures. Yet, a more compelling story of Morgan's legacy emerges from his role during a financial crisis far more dramatic than any iceberg. In 1907, Wall Street faced a harrowing collapse as banks failed, and panic swept through the nation. Triggered by a failed attempt to corner the market on United Copper Company stock, the economic fallout led to the collapse of significant financial institutions, including the Knickerbocker Trust Company. With no central bank to stabilize the situation, a void just 10 years before the establishment of the Federal Reserve, Morgan took it upon himself to save the nation's economy. He convened the leading financiers at his New York mansion and devised an intricate rescue plan. By coordinating the response of banks, securing international lines of credit, and purchasing undervalued stocks, he orchestrated a system-wide recovery. Morgan famously locked influential bankers in his library until they agreed to collaborate in securing funds for struggling institutions. Miraculously, by November 7, 1907, the panic subsided. Morgan didn't just save banks, he exploited the crisis to his benefit. Amidst the chaos, he acquired Tennessee Coal, Iron and Railroad Company at bargain prices, gaining competitive advantages approved by President Teddy Roosevelt, a staunch advocate against monopolies. The irony of J.P. Morgan's tale lies in his overwhelming influence over the American economy. His power struck fear in the government and led to the pivotal creation of the Federal Reserve Act in 1913, intended to prevent any individual from becoming the sole source of financial stability. Consequently, Morgan's life and actions not only cemented his legacy but transformed the landscape of American finance. Morgan passed away on March 31, 1913, just 9 months before the Federal Reserve began operating, a system established to ensure no individual could wield such power alone again. In summary, J.P. Morgan owned the Titanic through a convoluted corporate network, built monopolies across several industries, saved the American economy single-handedly, and prompted the creation of an institution designed to curtail individual financial dominance. The myths surrounding the Titanic pale in comparison to the audacity of his true endeavors. Morgan didn't need to sink ships, he was too busy building empires. Subscribe for more fascinating stories like this as we explore the depths of history.